Our opening words this morning come from a very famous TED Talk, and you may have heard it before. It's by the Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It's called The Danger of a Single Story. This is an excerpt from her talk. It's definitely worth listening to in full if you haven't, or if you haven't recently. She talks about how when she was a child, she wrote fiction, and even though in her climate it was never cold or snowy, she wrote about characters who played in the snow, because the only stories she ever read had characters who played in the snow. These are her words later in the talk. It is impossible to talk about the single story without talking about power. There is a word, an Igbo word that I think about whenever I talk about the power structures of the world, and it is Nkali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political worlds, stories too are defined by the principle of Nkali. How they are told, who tells them, when they're told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. She continues, I spoke recently at a university where a student told me it was such a shame that Nigerian men were physical abusers, like the father character in my novel. I told him that I had just read a novel called American Psycho. And it was such a shame that all young Americans were serial murderers. But it would never have occurred to me to think that just because I had read a novel in which a character was a serial killer, that he somehow was a representative of all Americans. This is not because I am a better person than my student, but because of America's cultural and economic power. I had many stories of America. Now we're singing a song. We're going to sing a song together that I taught at the in-gathering service. So if you were at the in-gathering service, or if you are familiar with the group Mamuse, you will be familiar with this song. It's kind of a story in song form. And so it has two parts, and the first part is the more rhythmic, repetitive part, and the second part is more melodic. So let's start with the first part. And it goes like this. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. And then it repeats, and it's almost the same, but the end is a little bit different, so listen. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Let's try both parts together. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. The more melodic part goes like this. Oh, river, I hear you, feel you calling me. Let's try that. Oh, river, I hear you, feel you calling me. Oh, river, who will I be when I reach the sea? Oh, river, who will I be when I reach the sea? Let's put both those melodic parts together. Oh, river, I hear you, feel you calling me. Oh, river, who will I be when I reach the sea? All right, so when we put those two together, they blend really beautifully. So let's have, Brad has a strategy. What is the Brad strategy here? He's got a choir strategy. So, yeah. You'll do rhythmic over there? All right, I'll do melodic over here. It's the Brad strategy. All right, so.
We'll start the rhythmic first.
Yeah.
One and two and finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home.
All right, everybody get ready here. Oh, river, I hear you, feel you calling me. Oh, river, who will I be when I reach the sea? Oh, and we have to do, gosh, I really just want it to be time for someone else to say something. Will you please rise as able to join in our congregational affirmation printed in your order of service? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to First Parish in Bedford on this really brisk day. Oy, I am not ready for winter. I don't know about you. I'm Deb Weiner. I am the Interim Director of Religious Education here at First Parish, and I'm very glad that you are here. Whatever is going well or maybe less well in your lives, I am glad that you came in the doors today. That is just wonderful. And I want to affirm that whether you are differently abled or whether you are politically radical or conservative, older or younger, or somewhere in between, in whatever ways you are you, we welcome you. Now, following the service, we hope that you will join us in Community Hour in the Common Room. That is the large room that is across the hall and behind us. Please stop by the welcome table on your way to find out more about this congregation and also tell us more about you. You can also fill out a blue connection card during the service. They should be in the pew racks in front of you if you would like to stay in touch with us and find out more about what's going on. Now today, we are having a one-room schoolhouse religious education program. Really, it's an art program. It is called Mural Day. It is a beloved tradition of this congregation and an opportunity for our children and youth to design and paint murals for the holiday season that will be going up around here starting in early December. So if you are young or feel like being young today, just come with us when we leave and we will design our murals on the lower level of the church. And if you have a younger child who would be happier playing with Samantha and friends in our nursery and play space, please come on down and we'll do that too. Now, in the back of your order of service, I want to call your attention to the announcement and the calendar section. You'll find lots of news there, but keep listening to me because there's a lot going on around here. First of all, I want to say that there is a big concert coming up here at First Parish. It is next Saturday, November 16th at 7:30 p.m. with the Camp Harris Band. Now, this concert is open to the public, and we are hoping and, in fact, needing you to come to it. Why? First of all, we want to fill the house. Maybe before, first of all, Camp Harris is awesome. Ask Olivia Evans. She'll tell you, and so will lots of other people. You can find Camp Harris videos online. He is amazing, and you won't want to miss him. Beyond that, I want you to know that all proceeds from this concert will help to support a new fund here at First Parish to help youth participate in service trips and trips to other locations, like our UUNO trip, like the trip to the borderlands that will be going on in April, and other kinds of service trips. So it's important for you to bring your support. But you're going to have fun at the concert. And you'll have more fun if you come to the pulled pork supper that is only for the First Parish community and our friends, of course, starting at 6 p.m. You'll get pulled pork, coleslaw, mac and cheese, all that good stuff. So that starts at 6 o'clock. The concert is at 7:30. And I believe that there will be folks set up in the common room from the Religious Education Committee with their laptop computers to help you get online right away to Brown Paper Tickets, which is where you purchase your tickets for this concert. So don't miss it. Now, we also want to remind you that the trans inclusion course is going to be meeting. We've been starting this program and gathering once a month, and our next gathering will be next Sunday at 12 o'clock in the common room with a light lunch to precede it at 11:45. And Annie and I hope that you will join us so that we can further explore trans and non-binary welcome and inclusion in this congregation. I also want to remind you that next Sunday we will be welcoming new members. And if you are so moved and you want to become part of this congregation, please talk to Annie following the service. She'll be glad to talk with you about how to do that. And the other reason why you want to be here next Sunday is that Nick Page is going to be coming. He's going to be our worship leader and music leader. You may know Nick. He is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. He is the founder of the Mystic Chorale, and he has composed hundreds of pieces which have been performed in UU and secular settings, including many schools. So he will bring his special magic along with a few of our musicians from this congregation to that service next Sunday. So holy Moses, there's a lot going on at this place, and it's awesome. So welcome again, my friends. And now let us move on with our service. Annie, are you going to start us off with our time for all ages?
Well, our time for all ages this morning is coming to us from our youth who went to City Reach.
All right.
And our guest junior, so come on up.
First of all, a quick thing about the Camp Harris concert, it's vegetarian meals as well, so if anyone's vegetarian, they can come. So a week ago on Friday, 8 of us SYGers went into Boston with a program called City Reach to help and learn about the homeless. Many of the staff were either homeless or used to be homeless themselves. We heard their stories and got to know each and every one of them. When we think of homelessness, the first thing that pops into our minds are negative stereotypes. Why not just get a job and get off the streets? Well, it's those views by society that can make it so hard for homeless to get the help they need. The multiple homeless people we met throughout the day either had endless medical bills so they couldn't pay rent, got kicked out onto the streets, abandoned, or experienced the lack of affordable housing. After this event, I can easily say that we have all changed our views on homelessness, and we will try to help the community a lot more.
Thank you for the stories we heard, the people we met, and for the opportunity to cross divisions. Learning names and faces instead of looking at statistics help us inspired us to help people in need. We are moved to be braver, educated, and inspired to engage. Help us to keep seeing the values in others regardless of where they are on their life's journey, and to reach out, give back, and spread love in our communities. We want to bring about justice, mercy, and compassion by sharing our love, awareness, and smiles.
Joining us here today is one of the staff members from City Reach. He helped us navigate around Boston at night and showed us what needed to be done and helped us give clothes to people. And best of all, he made sure we were always smiling. So, round of applause for Junior.
I'm gonna beatbox for y'all kids anyway, but I ain't doing it.
Thank you for sharing a bit about how we might rethink our stories of those who are living on the streets and expand our stories as well. We will now sing our kids onto their activity for the day, and we will be reprising our O River. So let's get it started.
Let's get me started. You can pick whatever part you want. You got it? Ba-da, got it? 1 and 2 and finding my way, 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 finding my way back home. Finding my way, 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 finding my way back home.
Let's take a breath together. Each of us holds so many stories in our bodies, in our minds, in our hearts. The stories of those we love who are no longer with us, who live on in the stories and the memories. The stories of those facing challenges, medical issues, challenges with finding housing, jobs, conflict, so many stories that people may keep hidden and that people may share with us, sharing their precious stories. We share stories of joy and celebration at those who are recovering from challenges, at those who have had milestones in their lives, at the relationships that we cherish. It can be hard to hold so many stories, big and small, in our little selves, our little human selves. And so it is good to take moments to honor those stories. When we share them as a community, it can make them easier to carry. When we take a few deep breaths in a sacred space, it can make them easier to carry. May each of us find ways to lighten the weight of the stories and to give them space in our hearts and in our relationships. May it be so. Oh, boy, it's like I really think someone else is going to lead this service. Is John back yet? Hi. I really am excited to introduce to you a friend and fellow organizer, Elizabeth Rucker, who has come from Boston this morning to tell us a little bit about some other stories that we need to be aware of. She's an organizer with Showing Up for Racial Justice Boston, otherwise known as Surge Boston, and through that work is supporting a group called Mass Power. And she's going to tell us a little bit about how we can be supportive of folks who need us to have a different story about voting rights and incarceration.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for welcoming me into your congregation today. Before I get started, whenever I'm talking about people who are locked in cages, I want to bring into the space the people that I write to and speak with on the phone. Their names are Wayland, JJ, Gary, Julio, and Greg. And I know that this room might be a little bit fuller if my friends were here, and I want to just extend an invitation for those of you who have people inside to imagine them sitting with us today, however complicated that story might be. Pivoting from that, the first question I want to ask is, who here cares about voting? Okay, and of those of you who think that voting matters in some way, who thinks Massachusetts had an important role in founding democracy in the United States? Okay. And how many of you knew that Massachusetts was the most recent state to remove the right to vote from a class of people constitutionally? When I was 10 years old and living in Oklahoma in the year 2000, interim Governor Cellucci announced his intention to remove the right to vote from people incarcerated on felonies in Massachusetts. This was a direct response to black prisoners at MCI Norfolk organizing a political action committee. Now let me stop here, because when I hear the word PAC, I'm like, money isn't speech, PACs are bad. But this PAC was designed to encourage people inside to vote, to teach them about their rights that they had at the time, to exercise that right, to send questionnaires to legislators about their positions on various criminal justice reform issues, and other important political activity for those behind bars. Well, I think that this was a blatantly racist response. The legislature and the governor said, nope, that seems bad. He immediately issued an executive order banning the participation of prisoners in PACs and announced this intention to amend the Constitution of Massachusetts to remove the right to vote from prisoners. And so this was a ballot initiative created by the legislature that went to the polls and was passed by Massachusetts voters, saying, you can't vote anymore. And it's been 20 years. of no voting for people incarcerated on felonies. And I think there's a couple of reasons why we need to be worried about this, and why I'm responding to the call from people inside to help them with this effort to restore their right to vote. To give you context, by November 20th, we need to have gathered 100,000 signatures from all across Massachusetts to say that we want to be able to vote on this in 2022. So this is the first leg of a very long haul. I think that talking about voting matters in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think many of us here are probably engaged politically or civically in some way, and I'm going to guess that a UU Church are pretty appalled at the current state of affairs in the country and maybe even in Massachusetts. And so, right, like, I think there's this kind of baseline, like, everyone should be able to vote. I think as someone who works every day pretty much with people who are behind bars, as a friend, as a loved one, as an organizer, I also think there's an important thing that I forget about. So I'm going to ask you to sign a petition later, spoiler alert. But very simple acts of political expression are not allowed in prison. So, for example, we can't take the petition inside because those folks are not registered to vote, so they can't sign it. But even something as simple as having a conversation in the yard about how the conditions are at the prison could see you sanctioned, whether that might be a loss of your phone privileges, if you're, like, maybe that conversation happened on the phone, or I've even had so I also work with Deeper Than Water, which is an abolitionist coalition working to hold the state of Massachusetts accountable for toxic conditions in the prisons. One of our organizers was sent to solitary confinement for over a week for picking up a case of water to share with other people in a prison where the water has been demonstrated to be toxic. That's MCI Norfolk. So when I think about political expression and how important that is for the people who are most directly impacted by issues to change their condition, a lot of the avenues that we use outside are cut off. If the right to vote were restored to prisoners, there would be a sanctioned way for people to come together and talk about what they want to do, how they want to act politically, in a way that would be protected from the prison administration. And I think that that's really important, right? Because we have to be able to have a legitimate means by which people can discuss what they want to see for their condition. And I think voting rights does that. It helps build links between the inside and the outside, which my friend, I'm probably going to reference Wayland a lot as I talk to you today because he's brilliant. If he was here with us, as I referenced earlier, he would be talking. He's great. Anyway, now I lost my train of thought. I think about Wayland so much because of I guess that's a good way actually to come back on track. Wayland has so much to give that he wants to be in communication with all people working for liberation and justice inside and out. And being able to talk about this through voting rights would be a way that conversation can begin. Because I'm a prison abolitionist, and you might not be yet, and that's okay. But I think that the way we start is by having conversations about things we can agree on. So voting rights is one place to start. I also think that there is a bigger question here about what voting gets to the heart of. Because the right to vote is, I tend to think about it, like I said, in this sort of tactical way. And that is a right that has been hallowed by the blood of Black and brown people, women, indigenous people, poor people from the beginning of this country. And it means so much more than that piece of paper we drop in a ballot box on a Tuesday in November. It goes right to the heart of who do we consider part of our community? What stories are we willing to tell about harm and about safety? I want to say that the 5 people that I named are all incarcerated for violent crimes. They all hurt someone. My friends are not locked up for misdemeanor drug offenses or even large nonviolent drug offenses. They're all accused of murder or other very violent things. And I think that what we have to do is consider that people who commit those very same violent acts are not in prison. They go to the ballot box. They ride the bus with us to work. They sit next to us in the office. These are people that we think of, even if we don't know their criminal record, or if they've never even been accused. We are not separate. And what prison does, and this is what Wayland was going to say, Wayland says that the walls don't exist to keep people in. The walls exist to keep us from seeing inside and seeing the humanity, seeing those stories. I was really moved by many parts of this service, but the youth who spoke earlier about thinking about stories and faces and names and not statistics will get us a lot closer to changing the current conditions than thinking about statistics about who did what in this way, because there are a lot of ways we can complicate why people end up in prison, like can sort of go through procedurally, but I want to think about what are the stories that led people to be in that place. And I've come to the realization over my journey that people who are in prison, it's much more about who they are than what they've done. And when I accept that fact, that helps me have compassion and want to build with them for a different world, a different way of addressing harm. And so I think I guess those people, because they have a community, whatever community that is, they still care about the holes at the end of the street and that they want city council to fix. They still have kids that use the school system. They still care about healthcare and about immigration and all the other issues. They have rich interior lives and political feeling that need to be expressed in this very simple way that pretty much all of us in this room agreed was important. And I lost my train of thought. So the Supreme Court, in the light of this, has a decision that actually has declared prisoners civilly dead. What does that mean when we're telling people from a court that once you enter this system, whatever you've done, whatever the circumstances, whatever the story was, you're dead to us? And it all seems to happen in this way of like, you're going away and you're separate and we're safe now because you're away from us. And the reality is, aside from all the ways I want to say that's a bad line of thought in general, almost everyone who goes to prison will come out at some point. But we spend every moment, from the minute you are arrested, through your release, probation and parole, being told that you don't matter, that you are dead, that your voice, that your story doesn't matter at all. And I wonder what would change if we followed the hymn we all sang together and thought of ourselves as rivers flowing to the sea. Because who will people be when I reach the sea with my friends alongside me, right? Like, we're all passing through different terrains. Maybe some people caused a flood and knocked a home down. Maybe some of us only ever watered pastures and fields, but I think we're all can agree that we're rivers flowing to the sea in the spirit of that story. So I'd much rather spend my time and my vote working with people who are behind bars so that we can all be free. I think this is crucial to racial justice in the United States, to expanding democracy, true democracy in this country, and making sure that we all have a say in what the story we write together is. So that's why I'm going to ask you to sign this petition, to help us join the other 100,000 people in this state that will rise up and say, we're going to get this on the ballot so that we can vote on it, so I'll be back in 2022 if we win, and asking you to get to the polls, because this is, again, just the first step. So what I'm asking you to sign today is a petition that would make restoring the right to vote to people incarcerated on felonies a ballot question in 2022. Now, I know you're going to explain a little bit more, but we're going to pass around the petition during the offering. And what I need you to do is be very careful. Was anybody around when you were trying to pass a single-payer health care in Massachusetts? Yeah, okay. So when that happened, the big pharmaceutical companies and all the big corporations hired these fancy lawyers to sue different towns and say, oh, there was a stray pen mark on that, there was a coffee stain on this, that paper was a little off, and they invalidated the signatures. So I need you to be very careful when you sign. I have an example card at the top, but in the short version is, in the left-hand column, you're going to sign and print legibly your name. Sign and print in the left-hand column. And in the right-hand side, write just your street address, the street address at which you are registered to vote. So if you moved recently and you haven't changed your registration, please use your old address. But otherwise, use the address at which you're registered to vote. And then at the bottom of the sheet, there's a little box, and it says, only registered voters of blank may sign. And so if you're from Bedford, make sure you're signing a sheet that says Bedford. And Annie let me know that almost everyone's from Bedford, so, okay. Okay, well, if you're not from Bedford, just flip it to a blank one, write your town name at the bottom, and then sign like I said. Got it? All right. And if you have questions, so it's like if you have questions about that, or about the campaign, or about prison abolition, or about why I chose to wear red shoes, or anything else, you can talk to me during the community hour after this. Can I take questions? They have a hand. Okay. We should.
If it's procedural.
Yeah.
Yes. Procedural question on the petitions?
If we've already signed the petition, should we sign it a second?
No, you should not. Don't sign it again. Only once.
Yeah. And if you make a mistake, which we all do, you're gonna just draw one firm line through it. Don't scratch, just one line, and then correct your mistake. Whether that's flipping to a new sheet to sign for a different town or something like that. But again, I don't want us to have, we could have lots and lots of questions. If you understand, sign it. If you don't, find me at community hour and we will do it together, okay? All right.
Yes. All right. So this is a time when we collect our financial contributions.
Will the petition be available at the coffee?
Yes. Yes, it will. So this is a time when we collect our financial contributions that sustain this community. And this morning you have this extra opportunity to act on our fifth principle, the right of conscience. So exercise your right of conscience to sign or not sign, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. And so as the papers come around, exercise that right to sign correctly or not sign, or wait till community hour when you can ask Elizabeth more questions. The morning offering will now be gratefully received. This morning, I want to tell you a story. And don't worry, it's a pretty short story. But the thing is, I'm not exactly sure how I want to tell the story. It's a complicated story. You see, it's a story about my dad, and I love my dad, and I'm very proud of him. And he's a wonderful man, and I like to tell stories that demonstrate what a generous and committed person he is. But this story is not one of those stories. And this story is also complicated because it is about a war. It's about the war that the United States got involved in Vietnam, a war that we sometimes call Vietnam, as if an entire country and people full of a million stories could be reduced to one single story, our country's story. I want to tell this story, but it happened before I was born. And I want to tell this story in a way that doesn't harm. I don't want to tell a story that validates or lifts up war or violence as a positive thing. I think we have too much of that story already told by the powerful. And I want to tell a story in a way that honors veterans. This is Veterans Day weekend, and I know that each and every veteran has their own story, complexities, and challenges, and that far too many of our veterans end up living on the street and homeless, end up incarcerated, even end up deported after serving their country. How can I fit it all in one little short story? Well, the first thing is that I want to approach it with humility, that this is just my telling of one person's story. And I want to make space in it for your stories. You are not going to tell them in this moment, but you carry them with you. And many of you were alive during the story I'm going to tell, and you have your own experiences with that time in this country. I want to make space for all that you're bringing. And that's such a tricky thing to do when we tell our stories, to tell our stories gently enough that we make space for the stories of others, but clearly enough that we own them and honor them because they are ours. And I think that at its best, Unitarian Universalism is a faith that is about exactly that thing, that we bring our stories humbly, knowing they are unfolding, and that as we tell them truly and vulnerably, we make space for the stories of those around us, those in our communities, and those not yet in our communities, as best we can. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Ernie, and he was growing up in Miami, Florida, and he didn't like school very much. He was very smart, but he thought that homework was pointless, and he didn't like to do it. And he wouldn't have graduated high school except that he had a sister named Linda who was a little less than a year younger than him. And she thought it was important for him to graduate high school, so she helped him a little bit with his homework, maybe even took charge of it herself, and made sure that he graduated. But Ernie, he was maybe not seeing an easy trajectory forward in life for himself, and he was hanging out with what he terms a bad crowd, and they decided for some reason or another to burgle a department store. This did not go well. And so he found himself facing a dilemma. Should he take a plea deal that would make sure that this incident would not be on his record? He could avoid all the stories that come your way when you have a criminal record, and he could avoid many of the repercussions if he were willing to join the armed forces. He decided that was a deal worth taking, and he chose the Navy because he thought the Navy would be the safest way to avoid going to Vietnam. But he was wrong. And he was stationed his first year on a river in Vietnam in support of people who were fighting there for the United States. Now, in the Navy, he took an aptitude test, and it was suggested to him that he might be good at electrical work. And he studied electrical work in the Navy, and he became an electrician. And this served him very well. He worked as an electrician the rest of his adult life, the bulk of it at Illinois State University, where he was on the maintenance staff, and he retired from there having had a very fulfilling, sustainable career that supported his family. And in the Navy, he did not have to do or experience the violence of war directly. He told me once about when he was on a watch, when he was stationed for a watch one night, and how he was thinking to himself, what would I do if we were under attack? What would I do? He did not want to kill anybody, and he did not want to leave his buddies in a vulnerable position. But he was lucky. He was not faced with having to act on that hypothetical. They weren't ever attacked. He worked on the boat in the river, and after a year, he was stationed in the Mediterranean, away from the combat. For him, this experience was mostly positive, and yet it came from two negative experiences: the experience of being charged with a crime and the experience of having to participate in a war he was morally opposed to. And it is this complexity that I hold and that I think of most when I think about Veterans Day. When I think about the choices that we make in our lives and how they are so rarely simple ones. I am so grateful that I have never in my life had to make that wondering about what I would do. I've never had to be on guard. I've never had to hold a weapon. I've never had to be trained to do violence, and I'm so grateful. I don't want anyone to have to do that, and yet I know that we live in this world. We don't live in some other world without wars and militaries. We live in this one. And there are people who have made that choice for so many reasons. Because they believe in this country, because of economic reasons, because of reasons like my dad, because of drafts, because of debt, because of all kinds of reasons. And so I think about this every year, about this idea of each of us having our complex stories. And I practice thinking through how I hold that the overarching narrative in our country of war being somehow a positive thing, a necessary thing, a valiant thing, is one I never want to tell. And at the same time wanting to hold and honor the stories of all those who have had to experience war in so many different ways. There's no simple and there's no easy answer. It's just a messy game of figuring it out as we go, sharing the bits of what we hold dear and listening to others. And I hope that in that messy practice, we will get closer and closer to being a community of real care that truly values each and every person, the people who have done harm and been incarcerated, and the people who have done harm and not been incarcerated, the people who have fought in wars, and the people who have conscientiously objected to wars, the people who have absorbed harmful stories that valorize violence or dehumanize people who are incarcerated or homeless, and those of us who are unlearning those stories and doing our best to tell different ones. And so I encourage you on this day and every day to risk telling more of your story when you think it is the story that needs to be heard, and to risk deeply listening to the stories of others when perhaps your story is not the one that is needed in that moment. And to practice over and over that holding your own sacred story and that making space for it to grow, to develop, to flow on to the sea as more and more stories flow in to join. I think this is the way that we will get free and we will learn to love each other better. Because at the end of the day, we are all here together. We are all here together on one big boat flying through outer space. It's the only boat we've got, and we better be able to save it together. So let's practice telling our stories in ways that do just that. We will close with our closing hymn, Blue Boat Home. It's number 1064 in your teal hymnal.
Below me, I feel
May we tell our stories and listen to the stories of others as if we were all stuck on a boat out in the ocean together, and the only way to survive was to love each other, because we are.